Welcome, dear viewer. I'm your host, Carmila. We are now entering the spookiest month of them all. To keep the spirits alive, I gift you my offering. Now, turn off your lights, relax, and enjoy. But if you will not do so, behold, you have sinned against the Lord, and be sure your sin will find you out. What is sin? It's nothing more than a cultural taboo, a thing handed down, dreamed up in the eons past, altered through centuries of religious doctrine. Is it an attempt of our mammalian brains to frame our inner feelings against a backdrop of meaning? To pretend as if our dislikes, our revulsions, our disgust originates from a place beyond us, not quirks of an evolutionary gamble, but a defined law innate to every man, hidden away in the deepest corners of his heart, placed there by the benevolence of some deity, always guiding, whispering, urging. Whether gifted by instinct or tradition, nature or teaching, I do not know. I am not a learned man by any means, a theologian or a scholar, but I know sin in a way that all the philosophers and saints of the ages could only have thought about in the darkest hours of the night. And even then, the imaginings would have been quickly pushed away, shaken off as some foul thing that may only briefly be allowed admittance, lest its stain grow and pollute the inner sanctum. I know sin for what it truly is, a warning, a cautionary parable, a reality. It is said that once committed, sin never disappears. It may be shut away, locked up, forgotten about, never to be recalled in speech or in thought, but it remains, it waits, it bides its time, it knows what its time will soon come, where it will emerge from the shadows, victorious, triumphant. Until then it rests, in the dark, in the unseen, in the barn. I thought I could hide my sin. Nay, I did hide it for a time. Successful, I confined it to the night, that realm of darkness that disguises all manners of evil with its mantle. In the daylight, my transgressions were a distant memory, a bad dream, a ghostly recollection of that possessed no power to cast a stain on my image. Even my self-image couldn't be touched by my nocturnal activities. My mind and my soul were clean before my fellow man. My sin first began its foray out of its dark resting place on that day last spring. Arriving late from business in town, I entered the barn where my wife and the tired hand were attending to our heifer, then straining in labor. It was there that I first confronted it face to face. The image still burned into my mind and resurfacing in my foulest dreams. I fled from the barn in horror. My wife never spoke about it, choosing instead to continue to cultivate some semblance of normality with the grim stoicism so common to country wives. I dismissed the higher hand the next day. There was no calf at the market that year. For all the grim trials that my wife endured in her life, there were some horrors that still could not touch that maternal spark that still burned deep within her. Having completely abandoned all work in the barn, I would see her on some days, carrying items into it, blankets, food, and eventually playthings and books. I never questioned her about it, just as she never questioned me. But I should have known that fate had made her an instrument in bringing my deeds out and in front of my eyes. On that last evening when I sat in my reading chair in the farmhouse, I enjoyed what little peace I had left in my life, and the last peace I would ever know. A distant call caught my ear. A yelling. No, more of a bellowing, a screaming, both animalistic and yet somehow familiar. A cold slowly spread through my being, then a rattling of the doorknob. My breathing grew more rapid as I dropped my newspaper and slowly rose to my feet. The door opened and slowly swung inwards. It had found me. It lurched into the house, slowly making its way towards me in its limping gait, its knees facing backwards, its deformed frame supporting limbs that ended in lumps, a mockery of hands. But worst of all was its face, warped, bovine, but so very, very human. The abomination opened its mouth and croaked out the words that destroyed me into my very soul. Daddy? My sin had found me out. I just wanted to give my thanks to for letting me use their story to narrate, and I'll see you all tomorrow.